Today I'm going to show you how to create a tiny planet in Photoshop. You are going to use one panoramic photo that you take as well as an object seen from above to put onto your planet. I'm assuming most of you know how to take a panoramic photo just on your iPhone, but if you don't, you can see me. Just make sure that as you pan across, this arrow is touching the line the entire time. You need to take this picture in an open space, maybe your front yard, your backyard, a park. I went up to the soccer fields and went into the middle of the field. You are going to try to have more land than sky. That just helps building your tiny world. You're also going to take a picture from above. You can either have an animal or yourself, have someone climb on a chair and take a picture down at you. But you are going to put this object onto your tiny planet when you're done. When you email this file, this panoramic file, to yourself, it often pops up that it's asking you what size of file. I've chosen large. I think they have small, medium, large, and then actual size. Actual size is way too big, and medium is a little pixelized, so I would recommend sending it as a large file. The first thing we're going to do is size this picture in a different way. So we're going up to Image, Image Size. You're going to click on that. Now, one thing we have to do is remove this Constrain Proportions. If this is constrained, what happens is if I turn this to a certain width, it automatically does this ratio. And what I want is I want to force it to be the same width and the same height. So I am going to uncheck Constrain Proportions. If your version of Photoshop does not have this box right here, it has a little link that shows these connected, and you just click on the link and it will remove this connection. Since I am working with a different version of Photoshop, I have a little box, but it doesn't really matter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make the width 20 inches and the height 20 inches. The resolution is 72. When I hit OK, we'll see that it turns into this really weird square that's kind of skewed. I'm going to zoom in. The next thing I'm going to do is rotate the image 180 degrees. So I'm going to go up to Image, Image Rotation, and I'm going to flip it. Then I'm going to apply a filter that's in Distort, and it's called Polar Coordinates. When I click on that, just hit OK, it's going to automatically skew the picture so that it already gives me this kind of tiny world feel. There's a seam on my picture right here where the two edges of the photo have come together. I'm going to use a spot healing brush to try to blend those together a little bit more. So it's in this little Band-Aid tool, spot healing brush. I'm going to make the size big enough for that seam. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line straight down the seam and then let go. You'll see that the two seams come together and it's a little bit more blended. You might see a little bit of a line still, so you could use the smudge tool we've used before to try to kind of blend them together and smudge them. You don't want to smudge the actual landscape here too much because that you'll be able to see. The other thing that this filter does is that it makes these weird lines around the outside that we do not want. So what I'm going to do is use that same smudge tool to remove these extra lines. Just like that. Now I'm going to look at my picture as a whole and think about the color. I think since this is already kind of an abstract image, I'm going to bump the saturation of my color to make it even stronger and more interesting. Now that I have my tiny planet built, I'm going to choose a photo that I've taken from above, either of yourself or a friend or even an animal. I'm going to choose my dog Harvey. We're going to use that quick selection tool to cut them out. Once I have it selected accurately, I'm going to drag it back over to my tiny planet, plop it down, and I'll probably need to adjust and use my free transform tool to make him a correct size. Maybe I want him tilted and place him onto my planet in an interesting way. He does not look like he is really sitting on the planet because he doesn't have a shadow. So I'm going to teach you how to add a shadow, and we're going to start by duplicating his layer. So I'm going to click on his layer and duplicate. Now on this one, I am going to select just my creature again. Once I have him selected on my duplicate layer, I am going to paint over him the color of the grass, only darker, to make his shadow. So I'm going to use my eyedropper tool to see what color this grass is. Once I have that color, I'm going to make it darker and a little more gray by clicking over a little bit in my color field. Then I'm going to use my paintbrush tool and paint over the entire selection. I'm going to do my Control D to deselect, and now I want to size this shadow. So I'm going to go Edit, Free Transform, and I'm going to squish it down a little bit. And here's where it's a little bit tricky, but you're going to try to place the shadow so that it looks like it's an accurate shadow of the dog. It helps if I drag my layer up so the shadow's behind him right now. I can use my transform tools, these warp and distort tools down here. Skew is helpful because then I can have my shadow move a little bit in the direction. I have a little more control over how it's skewed. So the main thing is I want the paws to have the shadow coming out of the paws, and then back here just having it to the one side is helpful. I'm going to hit enter to lock it in. Now it's not looking very accurate right now because there is a shadow going up off of the planet. So I'm going to hide my dog real quick. I'm going to choose my eraser tool, and I'm just going to erase where the shadow hits the planet. I'm going to pop my dog back in and see how realistic that looks. If you decide at this point that you want your shadow to be a little bit darker, you can always go back down, choose a little bit of a darker swatch. Underneath your gradient tool is a paint bucket, and you can just paint it right in. Like, I think that looks a lot better, just darkening it up. At this point, that's the end of the tutorial, so you're just checking it one more time to make sure everything looks good, saving it, and submitting.